Thank you, Adriana, and what an inspiring dialogue. Hopefully, we will be able to inspire in similar ways, different ways in our next dialogue, igniting the circular creative economy, funder and entrepreneur perspectives on bridging funding, digitization, sustainability, agency, and dignity. We will be exploring essential elements and strategies required to fuel the growth of a circular creative economy and advancing sustainable development and Agenda 2030, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, which tackle the grand challenges of our times globally by 2030. This discussion will bring together the perspectives of three brilliant change leaders, highlighting the importance of bridging funding gaps, leveraging the transformative power of digitization in an inclusive manner, the power of the grassroots entrepreneurship in shifting mindsets at scale, and promoting sustainable practices. It will emphasize the significance of empowering individuals and businesses to have more agency over their creative endeavors while upholding principles of dignity. By exploring an intersectional perspective on funding, digitization, sustainability, agency, and dignity, this discussion aims to inspire collaborative efforts to drive innovation, create economic opportunities, and foster a more environmentally conscious and socially inclusive creative ecosystem. Just before I introduce our speakers, inspired by Professor Otto, who's a new friend whom I deeply admire, I am also going to show a fabric. This fabric is called khadi. It's a beautiful, rough fabric. This fabric is a symbol, it's a fashion statement. It's a symbol, the symbol of a country that came together to throw off a colonial yoke. And Gandhi used this fabric as a symbol of unity of a nation. And so I wanted to show this because one of our speakers is called the Gandhi of the modern day, Anshu Gupta, an amazing social entrepreneur. And me and Anshu we are both Gandhians, and we share that spirit, as do all of us in different ways, as does Hecho, Nosotros, and Adriana. So I wanted to show khadi and not be left behind from Professor Otto and showcasing a very important fabric, fashion, but fashion that's an identity and fashion that is empowering and fashion created by grassroots. The reason this khadi became a symbol of the unity of India is that every rural person in India could weave this on a simple wheel. And it was a call to action to use only this fabric to throw off the colonial yoke. Sorry, it's just hearing all the inspiring stories made me tear up a bit. But it's a moment where we come together. We are a community. We are a family. We can share emotion. And this is what I love about Adriana and team. Now, without further ado, on to our amazing speakers. I'm honored to introduce our first speaker, the brilliant Christa Williams-Collette. Christa is a principal investor at Citi Impact Fund, Citigroup's $500 million double bottom line vehicle focused on climate resilience, the future of work, financial inclusion, and social infrastructure. Christa makes direct investments in both double bottom line companies and venture capital firms. Prior to joining Citi, Christa was an investment banker at RBC Capital Markets and JP Morgan and focused on technology transactions. She's a graduate of Columbia Business School in New York and resides in San Francisco. She's also a huge champion of inclusion and equity, and that's a thing I love about Christa. Christa, as you share your perspectives, I welcome you to touch on a few questions as relevant. How is the Citi Impact Fund bridging the gap between funding, sustainability, and digitization, leading to acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals here in our own country in America? What are some of the key challenges in scaling impact investing to advance the Agenda 2030 gap? What are some key challenges that prevent impact investment from funding the grassroots industries? How do you view circularity and sustainability in the creative economy and beyond? Over to you, Christa.
Thank you so much, Radhika, for having me. It's such an honor to be here. And for those of you that are familiar with this phrase, I have very tough acts to follow. So thank you for having me. I'll start by giving you an overview of what we do at the Citi Impact Fund and how the SDG goals are relevant to us. At the Citi Impact Fund, sustainability is one of our 4 key investment areas. It's one of the 4 key investment areas for our team. As a team, we're deeply invested in backing companies that are building digital solutions to address climate change by building climate resilience and a more sustainable economy. Specific to the SDG goals, climate action, sustainable cities and communities, and responsible consumption and production are core to what we do in our climate resilience vertical. For example, we've invested in responsible consumption and production through companies like Reaply and Full Harvest that are both building for the circular economy. We are keenly aware that reusing and recycling products naturally slows down the use of natural resources, reduces landscape and habitat disruption, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and supports jobs, primarily for some of the creative artisans that some of us have discussed here. We've also invested in sustainable cities and communities through investments in companies like Icon, a company developing low-cost 3D printed homes, and RTS, which is building a responsible approach to waste management. In terms of scaling impact investing, which is something that we're very passionate about, when we think about the future of our fund, we don't think of this as a very near-term commitment. We think of this as a very long-term commitment. And so scalability and sustainability of the impact investing model is something that's very, very important to us and something that we think about quite often. I would say some of the challenges of scaling impact investing is that it requires constant long-term and repeated commitments. So companies that are funded very early on will need follow-on financing over time. And as new ideas are generated across the globe, whether US or globally, they will continue to require capital to bring them to life. And I think it often surprises people how much capital is actually needed to execute on some of the best ideas. This means that investors and limited partners, those are investors that invest in the funds that then seed companies, will have to sustain interest and impact over a number of decades versus years. Corporates will have to review and renew their commitments each year, very similar actually to what we do at Citi. Founders will have to remain optimistic about the number of solutions available to all of us as time starts to run out as we get closer to our 2030 goals. And all of these will need to be measured. The success of all of these will need to be measured over time, and success for all of these will need to be defined over time as well. And that definition will evolve as time goes on. All of these things largely depend on the optimism and the focus of individuals, not just technology, which can be very, very difficult to sustain. The good news is that 89% of all investors, this is impact investors and non-impact investors, considered ESG issues in some part of their investment thesis. That's up from 84% in 2022, and that number only continues to grow. As LPs, again, these are the investors that invest in funds or provide capital to fund managers, continue to look for ESG signals in the funds and the theses and the general partners that they back, that number is likely to continue or at least to grow in the very near term. Next, I'll just touch on some key challenges that prevent impact investment from funding some of the grassroots movements or activities or industries. I would say this isn't a challenge for all impact investors, but one thing to keep in mind is that impact investors are still investors. So on some level, there is a focus on financial return that's often complemented certainly by our focus on impact, but financial return is important as well. When a solution is new, a market is unclear, or a company is still very early in its journey, it can be much easier to see the risks of investing in that item versus the long-term upside. The caveat to this, however, is that there are impact investors at all levels of the financing stack, and there are very optimistic and intelligent investors that are willing to invest in early movement-driven companies. So that's one of the exciting aspects, and there are fewer challenges, I think, than one might imagine. Finally, I'll speak to how your final question, how circularity and sustainability, how I view circularity and sustainability in the creative economy and beyond. In addition to our commitment to sustainability, we are also very invested in the future of work. Circularity and sustainable manufacturing models actually drive the creative economy. Companies, for example, that want to manufacture high quality clothing or products that will last for years or don't need to be replaced, want and need to work with artisans instead of machines. That alone will continue to drive the creative economy going forward. Circular models also extend the lives of the products produced by the creative economy, and in doing so, over the long run, increase their value. So as we continue to invest in the creative economy, in addition to looking at office supplies and city waste, we will also continue to look at supply chain models that are sustainable and fuel the creative economy as well. I'll turn it back over to you, Radhika.
Thank you, Christa, for your deeply insightful remarks and for the catalytic and system shifting work you do at Citi Impact Group, and the change you're bringing in the world. I'm really thankful. I am delighted to introduce our next panelist, Dr. Temina Madon, who happens to be a dear friend and colleague. Temina Madon is co-founder of the Agency Fund, which invests in ideas and organizations that expand human dignity and agency. She's also a member of South Park Commons, a technology community and venture capital fund in Silicon Valley, where she advises early-stage tech startups. Temina co-founded the Center for Effective Global Action at UC Berkeley and has served on the professional faculty of the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. Earlier, she served as a science policy advisor at the U.S. National Institutes of Health and in the U.S. Senate. She is a true systems change leading funder, a grant maker. We heard from an impact investor. Now we hear from an amazing academic grant maker. Temina, as you share a few words, could you also touch on a few questions that I'll pose to you? How can funds and financiers better support grassroots entrepreneurs and innovators in the circular creative economy? How do you view agency and accelerate it in the grassroots? What role does the Agency Fund play in accelerating digital transformation and entrepreneurship in the creative sector and beyond? How do you see technology, including AI, cryptocurrency, blockchain, in bringing agency and financing transparency to the grassroots? What role does dignity and directly funding grassroots artisans play in leveling the playing field? With your academic hat on, could you share a bit about how all stakeholders, including the indirect, direct funders and the grassroots recipients, all have better visibility, transparency on funding and other information on what is happening in the supply chain? Over to you, Temina.
Thank you so much, Radhika. And it's really a privilege to be part of this discussion and learn from everybody's perspectives. I'm with the Agency Fund, excuse me, as Radhika mentioned. We're a collaborative of donors who come together to invest in services that help disadvantaged people navigate difficult lives. Our idea or our thesis, something we're trying to test, is that everyone could use additional coaching, therapy, guidance, advice, insights as they navigate the world, but no one more than people who have been marginalized by the mainstream economy. And so the way we come to this conversation in part is through the lens of graduation programs. How many of you are familiar with the graduation model of poverty reduction? Maybe just show a hand. I see at the screen, maybe not so many people. But graduation as a program to fight poverty was introduced about 15 years ago by the Bangladeshi NGO BRAC. And it consists of 4 inputs that are provided to mostly low-income, ultra-poor women to help them escape extreme poverty. One of the inputs is business training. How do you operate a business when you have been marginalized and excluded from the economy? Another is assets. How do you start up a business if you don't have the initial capital you need to invest in inventory or other kind of capital intensive investments? The third is coaching. How do you navigate relationships with suppliers, customers? How do you cooperate with others in the market to bring your products to those who could use them? And the fourth component is peer support. Every woman in a graduation program joins a savings group with other women like her, women who are entrepreneurs who are trying to support their families and don't have access to jobs, so engage in entrepreneurship. That set of inputs has proven really transformative in a series of randomized experiments now across more than 10 countries, different contexts, different kinds of markets. These kinds of business coaching interventions have proven very transformative. That is part of what the agency fund is grounded on. This idea that if you provide people coaching, you provide them with peer support, they can build businesses that sustain their families and that enrich their communities. So where does that bring us to in this dialogue? The agency fund looks for ways to deliver insights that people may not be able to access themselves, but that can be delivered either through a frontline worker, somebody like a social worker, even a community health worker in some cases, but that also can be delivered through technology. So I wanted to give an example of one of our grantees who we think is doing some pretty innovative work. Has everyone heard of ChatGPT and this kind of large language models explosion? So we immediately thought, what can we do with these large language models, ChatGPT, to bring business insights to very poor entrepreneurs who don't speak English, who aren't using the internet? We have a grantee who has developed a chatbot that allows Kenyan entrepreneurs in rural areas who may be rearing chickens or eggs or rearing all sorts of agricultural products. We gave them the opportunity to interact with the chatbot just over SMS. This grantee put together all of the technology required to link things up. But Kenyan entrepreneurs had very profound questions that they didn't know how to answer, but that this large language model could answer. What's the best way to keep my eggs fresh when I bring them to market? How can I market these goods to customers I'm not getting good take up in my, from my stall? And what we found is that if you link these language models with repositories of information that are highly contextualized, meaning what are Kenyan entrepreneurs doing already in markets? Often this information can be found in UN documents, in research studies. You can capture information that does exist that is highly contextual. If you link that to a language model, you can produce business coaches digitally that operate in kind of an automated way. So we're experimenting with that. We have one grantee working in Kenya with this. We have other grantees working in different countries with different sectors. But the point is that we think that technology, and especially these large language models, can create access to business coaching for micro entrepreneurs, small and medium scale entrepreneurs who really could benefit from a coach, as all of us could. Another thing I wanted to say, echoing what Jeff Cole said earlier, is that entrepreneurs do need emotional and peer support. We found this evidence in the graduation program, but more broadly, anyone who has to cope with the uncertainty and the recurring challenges of running a business needs support. And so we've been investing a lot in services that provide mental health support or peer groups to small scale entrepreneurs. An example is Vida Plena in Ecuador. They are forming small groups of entrepreneurs who need access to support for depression. And it is a small group therapy sessions that they run via phone or in person. So I think there are a lot of ways that we can build the connective tissue and the support that entrepreneurs need to serve their communities. I will say there's a whole other sort of body of apps and digital services that we're seeing to support small businesses so that they can insert into supply chains that are more complex. Things like business registration, supply chain management, inventory management, accounting. There are now all sorts of WhatsApp-based services that allow people business owners to interact where they are. They're in WhatsApp for much of their lives. Allow them to interact and maintain their businesses in that place. There are groups like Kata Books in India, Oze in Ghana, other startups that are beginning to serve as the business infrastructure for very small entrepreneurs who need automation, just like any other firm. They need automation too. And I don't think that's a bad thing. This is automation that frees them up to do some of the interpersonal things required to maintain a business. So I will pause there, but those are some initial thoughts, and hopefully that answers some of your questions, Radhika.
Thank you, Temina, for the inspiring perspectives, the examples of inclusive use of technology, and in a sense, democratizing the use of the power of technology. And for the agency funds fostering the work of kind of advancing dignity, truly advancing the spirit of the SDGs of leaving no one behind. Our next speaker is an inspiring trailblazer, another dear friend who's transforming the relationship between urban and rural India, bringing systems change, advancing sustainability, circularity, human dignity, and more. Popularly known as the clothing man or as Gandhi in jeans, Anshu Gupta is a recipient of the 2015 Raman Magsaysay Award, popularly called the Nobel Prize of India. He started his development journey after quitting a corporate career in 1999 to initiate Goonj, the world's first agency working on the issue of clothing as a development issue, and now a lot more. In 2010, Forbes listed him as one of India's most powerful rural entrepreneurs. Anshu is also an Ashoka and Schwab Fellow. Under his leadership, Goonj has received national and international recognition on innovation, entrepreneurship, governance, and public service, and many awards. The Goonj story is one of the most inspiring I've ever come across, of kind of tackling and shifting the power balance between rural India and urban India, shifting the relationships, shifting how one views the other, and truly grounded in dignity. I will let Anshu tell that story. Anshu, as you tell us a bit about your journey and your work, could you also touch on these questions as make sense? How have Goonj and Gram Swabhiman used entrepreneurial and innovative methods to shift mindsets in the relationship in the power balance between rural and urban India? How do you ignite the circular creative economy? What are the primary challenges faced in bridging funding, dignity, and sustainability in rural communities in the global south? What role do you see grassroots entrepreneurship, stewardship, and digitization playing in all of this? Welcome, Anshu, and thank you so much for joining us this late in the night from India.
Thank you so much, Radhika, Adriana. And before I start, I think one comment on Temina's, conversation. I think, Temina, the so-called big entrepreneurs or the entrepreneurs who are running big organizations also need a lot of emotional support. To be honest, I think they need much more in today's time. Our work is very simple, to be honest, because we just wanted to change some of these, you can say, language and lenses around this work. So we said that on one part, if you see the world, there is huge amount of material lying in. Okay, the material, when I say, I talk about largely textile or pre-used, whatever stuff, from furniture to carpet to doors to windows and everything. Right. On the other side, there is acute material poverty. And material poverty is not the term which is commonly used, by the, for the people who do not have enough to eat. And whenever we say that half the world does not get 2 meals a day, or 1/3 of the world does not get 2 meals a day, with a very narrow vision, we think that people are hungry, which I agree that people are hungry, but we also need to understand that if people are hungry, they also do not have access to so many things. My journey started way back. I mean, now we are in our 25th year, and it's an Indian story, but it's common to all other places. We are also, spreading now in many other parts of the world, where we, to be honest, if I go back to my story, meeting a person who used to pick up unclaimed dead bodies for the local police, because these were the homeless people. And then he telling me that how in winters his work goes up, because we have more deaths in winters. And my what I thought initially that maybe the deaths are happening because of cold, but then you suddenly realize that no, it is not cold, because if the cold kills people, even I would have died. If I survive in the same temperature on the road, on my two-wheeler at a speed of 60-70 kilometers per hour, 30 years back, someone else dies on the road, it's actually not cold, but lack of clothing. I mean, clothing, which has never been a development subject. Clothing, which is one of the basic need, but there's no constant work. Either it is a disaster relief material, or it is a charitable subject object, or it is the most common thing which is dumped in the landfills, right? Or in the rivers, or what we heard from the earlier speakers also. And then the most shocking thing came from his daughter, who actually said that when I feel cold, I hug the dead body and sleep. She says it does not trouble me, it does not turn around. And that was a shocking moment, and it's a truly documented story of those days. And that is where you understand that, maybe there are certain things which we don't take as issues and which are not so complicated to solve also, because there's this huge wastage lying all across, and there is this need. And all the living beings complete their, we feel that they should complete their life cycle. And the non-living being, if it is not useful for me, instead of completing its life cycle, it goes in the landfills or in the dump. Okay? It's a simple thing. So what we do, we collect this huge amount of all unused material, clothing, utensil, footwear, door, windows, carpet, anything and everything. Goes through a very rigorous process because you have to match the need. The biggest problem with the donation mindset is that we give what we have. We don't give what people need. Right? We also objected on the word donation. We said that when we have already used something, with what right are we calling it a donation? It's actually a discard. We can't create a hello here by giving away our second-hand goods, because we need to be thankful to the people who are using our second-hand material, because they are the keeper of our emotions. They are the keeper of our hard-earned money. They give something, second life to something which is not needed by us, which is a burden on us now. So this is how it goes through rigorous process. And then the second life start, the economic model start. We said we will not do anything charitable with the most charitable subject object, which is your largely textile and other material. Why can't people earn it? Why can't people solve their own problems? And then instead of getting it as charity, because ultimately charity kills dignity of people, fine. And without dignity, we cannot think of development. For development, dignity is the most important part. And dignity also, you cannot give dignity to people. That's what I've been arguing in a whole lot of these lectures. Dignity is something with which every single person of any color, any shape, size, geography, economy is born. The society can only do two things. Either it can snatch dignity, challenge dignity, or it can respect dignity. So we said we cannot give dignity to people, but we can respect. So people actually take up very large scale local works. They build roads with the local resources. They clean water bodies. They dig well. They make bamboo bridges. All kind of, very sustained, very localized, using 100% local skill. And then after doing those works, they receive this material as a reward. So it is basically something which was going in landfill, and something which people thought that circularity means reuse it. Change the shape of the material. We are saying change the user first, and then change the shape of the material. First, the user need to change, because fortunately, we have various economic, kind of people. There is division, and it can be used. So, just in nutshell, it is the the self-respect and the wisdom of the grassroots. It is the urban underutilized material. These are two new currencies in a new barter economy, and money is for the logistics of it. The decision-making process has changed, because we are not going and imposing on people that every village will have a road. Rather, the community has a, now community is a decision maker. When Radhika was talking about that rural connection and empowerment, the empowerment is nothing. Empowerment is just respecting people as it is, to be honest. We disempower people when we snatch that, that agency, that the dignity part of it. So people choose their issues, they solve their issues, they are rewarded in kind. So the second-hand goods are a new currency for the world, as it is to start with. And anything which is not usable, a cotton cloth can become a sanitary pad, solving the problem of health. As torn jeans can become a school bag, solving the problem of education. So we also make about 100 such products, but absolutely linked to solving one particular problem as a resource. I'll stop, Radhika. I'm sure I won't have answered everything, but just wanted to give a gist of things which we are, trying to do. And I'm again saying that our lens is of dignity, our lens is of, and our What we are trying to do is that we are just trying to change the language, and we are the firm believer of optimum utilization of anything and everything, whether it is the wisdom or the the work of people, or the value of the material, which we all actually discard every single day, and which is becoming a burden. And to be honest, the topic for today's entire discussion is actually on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anshu, for those inspiring words. I wish we had more time. We need 40 hours. I welcome all three of our amazing speakers to share on the chat a bit more about your work. Anshu, perhaps the Goonj story. And thank you, Anshu, for always not hesitating to challenge all of us, me, Temina, all of us who believe in you, even on how we think and how we word, right? You are so right. We don't empower you, we don't give dignity. It is there. We need to reframe how we don't take it away, right? I love that framing. And thank you for always making us shift perspectives at every moment and think differently. And I also need to say that so many of my Stanford friends, top industrialists in India, they all, Anshu has shifted the mindset. He's not just saying these words, he succeeded in doing this. They think it's a privilege now to give their clothes and drop them off into the Goonj box, rather than first they thought they were doing a charity. Now they feel like rural India is helping them recycle and doing them a favor. So thank you for your work in shifting minds, Anshu. And Christa, Temina, for inspiring words. And thank you again for joining us from everywhere around the world on this dialogue. And now we go to a third dialogue. Back to you, Adriana.
Hello. Well, thank you. Such interesting, and thank you, Anshu, to align all of us. I totally agree with all you say. Thank you so much.